crazy night. At least everybody is hoping that the old Bristol is back, I guess, if there is such a thing as the old Bristol.
I got to ask the obligatory wild card question. For a long time, Bristol was thought of as one of the wild card race tracks. You know, you don't make any predictions for the championship until after you get through Bristol and Talladega. Is it still that way? Is it still a wild card track, or is it more predictable? It seems to me, from my limited intelligence, that since they repaved it, it's less wild cardish. Am I wrong or not?
I never thought of it as I've never thought of the short tracks as being wild card races. It takes a certain level of skill or a certain type of skill to go well there, to run well there. All of the short track races tend to streaks of some sort. Bristol is no different. There are a lot of 5, 6, 7 race top 10 streaks. You've got Darrell Waltrip back in the day put together 7 victories. You've got Kyle Busch, who almost put together 5 victories in a row, if not for some crash damage. Today's NASCAR car, both the car tomorrow and this new Generation 6 car, is so durable that you can take a little bit of damage, and you're more likely to get in trouble there than you are anyplace else. You hit the wall hard any place, and it's going to put you out. And you get to where you're racing with a bunch of people on any track, and you've got that same danger. So I've never thought of Bristol as a wild card race, before or after. So, no, it's not going to be any more so this weekend than it was previously.
Are there people there that are looking to Bristol to be their revenge racetrack? I don't know that there's any vendettas hanging out there, which may be a little bit usual from years past.
The vendettas are down in the Nationwide Series. You might see some of those on Friday night, but
I think that there could still be at least one big revenge story that could get played out. And Hamlin is so far out of the chase contention now. Logano just won last week, put himself in chase contention. I would keep an eye on those two when they get close to one another.
Yeah, good point.
But and if you're going to retaliate for anything, short tracks are a good place to do it. And whether or not we think that one driver owes another driver something, they've got much longer memories than we have. Once they start getting next to each other and rubbing on each other a little bit, the gloves come off. They lose their minds momentarily, and you just never know what could happen. So I think often at Bristol, what you see at the end of the race is retaliation for something happened at the beginning of the race rather than a couple of weeks ago. But it's a good place to settle scores. Okay,
so we're staring at a race that's we're only 2 or 3 races from the chase. So there's some outside influences on some of these front runners to not tank it totally. What's your Yahoo team going to look like this week, and do any of those things influence your picks this week?
There's a lot of desperation that's going to factor into this race. You've got Gordon, who's well out. You've got Logano, who now is in contention and hasn't been before. You've got a lot on the line in that 8th to 13th, 14th place in the points. And this is not a place where you want to race with any distractions whatsoever. You don't want to go into this race with desperation on your mind. So any of those drivers that are on the cusp and don't have momentum on their side would be drivers that I would probably look to avoid. I would avoid Gordon until at least the chase begins, no matter what. He practices well, he qualifies well, he wins the pole 15 miles an hour faster than the competition. I don't think he's a good pick just because whatever is going wrong with that team is going to continue to go wrong. So Bristol, he's got 5 wins. He and the 2 Busch brothers are the only ones with that much, but still, he's got to be a sucker's pick just because you don't know what's going to happen with him. So my team is going to look fairly conservative where short track's concerned. You're looking for those drivers who've done well on the short tracks all year, and you're looking for drivers who have traditionally done well at Bristol overall. In Group A, that means Clint Boyer. He swept the top 10 last year on the three short tracks. He swept the top 5 so far this year. A couple of second-place finishes. I think he's due. Bristol is not necessarily where you think of him as being at his strongest, but he's rewriting his record book so rapidly that you don't necessarily think of him being strong in a number of places. And he did have a top 5 there earlier this year. So Boyer, I think, is easily going to be my pick where Group A is concerned. You move down to Group B, and if you've got the allocations remaining, I think you got to put those Busch brothers on your team. They both have 5 victories. They both want to beat the other one to 6. If they get next to each other, they could beat on one another. But they both are equally capable of winning this race. Busch ran strong for much of last week until he got into the wall. Kyle Busch. Kurt ran strong all weekend long and was Logano's principal competition for most of the race at Michigan. So that team has really turned around. But a good dark horse down in Group B is Jamie McMurray. He's not necessarily the first driver that you think of anywhere except for those big name races on big tracks. But since the fall 2009 Sharpie 500, he's been consistent and occasionally very strong here. He finished 11th back then. He swept the top 10 the following year, which included a third under the lights. And he's finished outside the top 15 only twice in his last 8 attempts at this track. He would be a great differentiator because he's not necessarily one of those drivers that's going to spring to the front of a fantasy player's mind.
What about your C category?
C is a lot more difficult this week. At the moment, Ryan Truex isn't in the game since he's a brand new driver. I think he probably will be entered before the weekend starts. Even then, I think he might be fool's gold. I think a lot of the lusters come off that number 51 team since they did the deal to sell sometime around the chase. So I'm not even sure that he'd be a great value then, except unless you want to just extend your salary cap. Casey Mears is probably the guy that's going to end up being active on my team. He's had a season that is occasionally great or occasionally strong. He's becoming one of the go-to guys down in Group C. He's got a 15th and a 16th in 2 of the 3 short track races this year. And in both of those cases, he was I think he was the second best or the third best value each time. You take Allmendinger out of the mix, who was the best value on a couple of those races, and he easily could be, he could easily score top points this week with another mid-teens finish. So I put him there, and if he qualifies well, definitely would start him. If he doesn't qualify well, then you got a huge decision to make. Stenhouse has had a couple of 16th place finishes in short tracks, hasn't set the world on fire, and nobody else has either down in Group C. So I'd save Stenhouse just because he's going to be better on unrestricted intermediate speedways later, and I would make the pick probably between Mears and Reagan. Mears has had some teen finishes in the teens. Reagan's have been around the 20th mark, so Mears gets the nod.
All right, Dan, we got about 30 seconds to go. Who's your pick to win? I'm assuming you're going to go with Clint Boyer here, huh?
I think the battle will come down to Clint Boyer and Kyle Busch, and I think Busch wins.
Yeah.
He's got a little more aggression at the end, and he'll move Boyer out of the way without wrecking him if he has to.
All right, he is Dan Beaver. You can follow him on Twitter at Fantasy Race. Read all of his fantasy racing prognostications, advice, and tips on NASCAR.com and YahooSports.com, and of course listen to him every Tuesday here and on replays at On Pit Row. Dan, thanks again for your time this week. Good luck with your picks. Enjoy the race Saturday night, and try to stay cool out there in the desert Southwest.
I will definitely enjoy this race. This is the one I look forward to all year long.
Yeah, me too. It's really a lot of fun, and Beth and I had fun at the Mid Ohio Road Course Race for Nationwide. If you ever get a chance to do that, that was a gas. But this is probably second best for me. So thanks again, Dan. Talk to you next week.
Goodbye.
All right.
Thanks.
Dan Beaver. Okay, Steve-O, who's your pick?
I got a pick. I am going with a Stuart Haas Racing.